All right, welcome to the version control video series. In this series of videos here, we're going to really dive into how to successfully version control our project. We're going to be using Git, which is an open source tool that allows us to achieve version control. And then we're going to also be looking at Github, which is cloud-based repositories, is a service that allows us to host our code or our cloud-based repositories. So here's our agenda. In this video, I want to tackle these first two bullet points: downloading and installing Git, and then talk about what is version control, and then what is Git. All right, so before we actually install Git, let's just actually skip to the second bullet point and talk about what is version control and then what is Git, and then we'll go in and install Git into our local machines. So I'm going to skip ahead. So version control allows us to keep track of changes. And you'll see that when we began to use Git, there's a command that allows us to make a commit. And in that commit, we're basically time stamping and making a note of what we did to our project, or what we did to whatever we're version controlling. And that change is going to be notated, it's going to live with the project. And so what is the point of this is that it allows me to document all the changes I've made to the project folder. In this case, we're going to be building a web application. It's going to allow me to note all the changes we've made to the web application. But also, if I work with a team, they can also see my changes, or I can also see the changes of my teammates. And so version control also allows for a measure of experimentation. We're going to talk about a concept called branching, where we can make multiple, like a replication of our project and begin to experiment with it. And if we like those changes, we can merge it with the original project. But version control is really this idea of keeping track of all the changes that are made to the project folder. So that brings about Git. So Git has been a very successful open source tool that allows us to successfully version control. There have been other tools before Git, but Git is probably one of the more popular version control tools that's in the market. And so, so what we're going to do is we're going to download Git onto our machines, and Git comes along with a certain number of commands that we can run to successfully version control. So I would encourage you to watch both of these videos. So I would say pause this video and watch the version control video, and then also watch the Git video before moving on with this current video that you're watching. All right, so I want to jump back to where do we go to download Git. And so here's a URL. I'm going to copy this. You can just click it if you want, and I'm going to navigate to that URL, and I'm going to install Git onto my local machine. When you arrive at this page here, it's going to do its best to figure out which operating system you visit this page from. In this case, mine is Windows, and the current version of Git for this platform is 2.28. So I'm going to click on download, and it's going to download an executable file to my machine, and I'm going to let that install. It shouldn't be long, but I'm going to pause the video, and then once it's done, I'll pick back up here. All right, so once the executable file is down installing, it's going to bring up a window that looks like this here, the setup window. You can, if you want, you can read this license information. You could copy it and paste it into a Word document for later reading. But in this case, I'm going to click next, and it's going to show the location where it's going to install Git. We'll click next. Now this already exists on my machine, and it will say, would you like to install to that folder anyway? I'll say yes. It's going to give me a summary of all the various components that it's going to install. It's going to give me a Git bash terminal. It's also going to give me a GUI, a graphical user interface, where I can easily work with Git, and some file associations as well. And I'll click on next. If you want, you can click on this here to create a desktop icon for easy access. But in this case here, I'm not going to do that. So I'll click on next. Here's the name of the application for the start menu. And then here it shows you which editor would you like to use whenever there's like a merge conflict when you're using Git. And we'll talk more about merge conflict and how you can rectify those issues. In this case here, I have Visual Studio Code on my machine, and so I'm going to use that to mediate some of the merge conflicts. And so I'll select that and I'll click next, and then here I'll just go with the middle option. I'll use the OpenSSL library. I'll keep the first and everything else I kind of keep as default. And feel free to read through some of this if you would like. And then here you would hit all right, so once you hit install, you'll see a screen like this once the installation is complete. If you want, you can say launch Git Bash, because when you download Git, it's going to download a Git Bash terminal. And well, we don't have to use the release notes, so I'm going to unclick the release notes, but I do want to launch the Git Bash terminal. And I'm going to run a few commands before we end this video here. That's going to configure our terminal here. So we'll hit next, and then what comes up is a terminal that looks like this here. What I'm going to do here, let's jump back to our PowerPoint slide here. And the PowerPoint, there's a sheet of some of the most commonly used commands. If you click on that, it's going to download that document. And I want to just run through these first two commands. Now, there's going to be other videos here that we'll walk through that will cover some of these other commands. But for this setup piece here, let's go and configure the global username and the global user email. And so what I'm going to do is I'll just copy this for a quicker iteration and bring up my terminal, and I'm going to paste that in, and I'm going to set my username. And what I'm doing here is I am whenever I make a commit or a change to the file, it'll note who made that change. It'll list your username and your email of the person who made that change to the document, or who made that change to who made that commit. And so in this case, I'm going to say c.fulton, and I'll hit enter. And if I want to check to see if that's been set, I can say git config global username, and it should give me the cfig. So git config, not confit, global user name, and it should give me C14. Now I'll do the same thing for my email. So I'll say git config global, and then I'll say user.email, and I'll set that to C14 at dunwoody.edu. And if I want to check to make sure that that has been set, it should give me c14.edu. So though my username and my email is set for my terminal, so whenever I make a commit, it's going to record c.fulton and my email address. There's some other commands here. I can change the UI of my config terminal, or change the coloring of the command line. But like I said, that's your preference, and you can play around with that configuration or that setup for your environment. But in this case here, I'll just stick to this, changing this to username and the username and the user email. One last thing here before I end this video. I'm trying to keep it under 10 minutes here. If you go and say git --version, it's going to show you the version of Git. And so in this case here, my version is 2.28. But then another helpful command would be git --help, and it will show you a list of all the various commands you can run. And that's a common command you can run for a number of different within a number of different terminals to see what is at your disposal in terms of commands you can run. So we'll pick up in another video and go through some more commands here, primarily the commands that you see on this worksheet, and talk about workflow and talk about branching and some of the other cool things you can do with Git. Stay tuned.